Welcome, everybody, to Reverse Redaction. Welcome, Jared, still filling in for Ford in an undisclosed location, hammering away at his latest project. How are you today?
I'm doing great today. The only problem is this like weird nagging sense of deja vu.
Yeah, so our last attempt didn't do so well, but here we are, reverse redacting Ben Shapiro. Now, for those of you who don't know, do you have a little biography ready? You're such a Ben follower. Maybe you have more information than I do.
A biography on Ben?
Yeah.
No, I don't. I just know some. I think he went to UCLA. I think he also went to an Ivy League school.
Harvard.
He's got a law degree.
So Ben is this conservative Jewish guy who was somewhat of a virtuoso. Starting at the age of about 17, he became a pundit. He wrote for several blogs. He got hired, I think, at 18 at Breitbart. And he was an understudy of Andrew Breitbart, who sort of took him under his wing, and the late Andrew Breitbart, and has rose to notoriety mainly through the internet.
Mm-hmm.
When he left Breitbart, I think he's still in his, I think he's about 30 now, but he's still young. He's a young guy, and he looks younger than he really is, I think.
He does. He's got like that sort of like Michael J. Fox kind of boyish face that he'll just never. There's someone else that I'm thinking of, but it's not coming to mind. He'll forever look like a 12-year-old boy, and then like when you add in the voice too, he's got this kind of like nasally kind of voice that it is just kind of like sometimes listening to a teenager.
Yeah, well, I don't know. You're a lot more.
No. Look, he inspires me. Like I'm just like I look at it, and I'm just like this guy who has this incredibly annoying voice, talks kind of fast, and sort of uses these techniques to sound smarter than he really is, and he's got this huge following. And so when I see people like that, I'm like, that's kind of inspirational in a terrible sort of way.
Terrible. Well, it's you've always struck me as somebody very intellectual. Maybe that's what you're saying. That are you saying like it gives you hope that intellectuals can be popular?
No, actually, it's a lot more cynical than that. It's just that like no matter how many terrible qualities you have, if you just tell people what they want to hear, you can become popular.
All right. That's kind of at the heart of your argument. So that's at the heart of your gripe with him, right?
What is?
The fact that he's telling people what they want to hear and getting rich off it.
I don't necessarily care that he's getting rich off of it. But otherwise the whole telling people what they want to hear thing is just, I think we're in a place where, just like we talked about with Alex Jones in our little daily, well, not daily, but our our headlines, abbreviated broadcast, going through news headlines. We're just in a weird place now where the internet has really kind of changed the game in terms of people can go find someone saying whatever it is that they want to hear, no matter how awful it is, no matter how crazy it is. And of course, that's more for, along the lines of an Alex Jones, but still, whatever you want to hear politically, you can go find it with someone. And so I don't hate Ben. It's the, and it's not anything specific to him. It's all of these internet pundits. I get his appeal to people. And when he does a sit down interview with people, you know, he generally comes across as very cordial and professional, and I think even very likable. He's very engaging with either the person he's interviewing or the person he's being interviewed by. I also even agree with some of his viewpoints. It's not necessarily about his viewpoints, but I'm more of a moderate, so my views don't really follow along party lines. I'll agree with him on some things, not on others. But I dislike him for the same reason that I dislike Tommy Lauren or Matt Walsh or Chink Iger, Dinesh D'Souza, because they all deal the same product. And it's kind of ironic to me that Ben's motto is facts don't care about your feelings, because primarily what these people peddle are feelings. Be outraged about what the left is saying and doing. Feel righteous about yourself in comparison. Be afraid of what the left is doing, and on and on. And so they all need people's fear and outrage to get clicks and views and reactions and shares. And of course, that all translates to money. So it's your fear and outrage being sold for profit. And I think I've sent you, there's actually a pretty good link that kind of describes how that whole process goes. And we'll
put it in the show notes. Yeah, it's something like profit from outrage or something like that.
I think it's literally like how your fear and outrage are being sold for profit. I've shared it so many times. I think I've got it memorized, or at least I should by now. But yeah, that's what it comes down to. And it's just that, it just has a lot of real world consequences for people. People aren't most of the time, fortunately, going out and attacking other people or shooting other people. Those people are the outliers. But it's just, I think it's just really, the bill is coming due for that kind of thing more and more. And I think I still don't think we've seen the total of it yet.
But see, I mean, I agree with you to a certain extent, but I really disagree with your premise that these are charlatans greedily profiting off of old, conservative grannies outrage, when in fact these, so I say these because Shapiro he's a modern day newsman. He's a modern day, even if it's not, hard news, he's a modern day reporter of sorts, a newspaper man.
I mean, absolutely not to me. Again, I mean, coming from 10 years in journalism, and I mean, I'll admit that the line between news and opinion has blurred a lot, even with legitimate news organizations, even with major news organizations or whatever. The line between just giving you the story and giving you opinion has completely blurred, because that's what people want. Sort of. Go ahead.
But what is that based off of? Because what I hear you saying when you talk about it is he isn't a journalist because when he posts something, he only puts like a one-word thing, or his titles are sensational.
I make no. The one-word thing I just make fun of, simply on the basis that Ben is labeled as the conservative intellectual, and so the fact that he goes through and he'll post, or I'm sure he has people who post for him. He's said that. So they go through, and it is a lot of one-word headlines, or one-word, statuses on there, like what? Crazy town? No way. That I just make fun of, just because it's just funny to me that, Ben is labeled as the conservative intellectual, and he is a smart guy. But to see his social media feed, if you just glanced at that, you'd be like, oh, this is the intellectual conservative. What does the non-intellectual one look like? So I just make fun of that for that reason.
But so then what is the gripe here? That the titles are sensational? Are you saying that he lies, or that his company lies, or doesn't have facts and doesn't do reporting in their articles?
I mean, they do a certain amount of that. For the most part, they don't lie. But I mean, the thing with the mainstream media, what is the you tell me, like, what is the gripe with the mainstream media among conservatives?
The gripe of the mainstream media, that they're not, that they are, the main gripe is that they are biased and they pretend not to be.
Right. Okay. That is
Well,
just amplified times 1,000 with Ben.
no, absolutely not, because Ben is very clear that he is biased. He never says he's never said, I'm trying to look at both sides here. He's showing the facts, but he's showing the facts as a very staunch conservative. He believes in conservative. It's not like he believes in it because it's good. He believes it's good. It's like a doctor doesn't say, like, I'm going to prescribe this, but I'm also going to prescribe this because you never know. Critics are saying that this is good too, Like he says, like, this is going to cure you.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so he's news. So you think he's legitimate news, but he admits that he's biased, and so those two things are can have a symbiotic. They can go together.
It's not that they can. It's impossible not to be.
True, that's true, but it's all a matter of degrees, right? You can't have any kind of human, any type of human reporting without some level of bias. But if a guy runs, it's just like, okay, what do you think of? Because I've heard you and Ford talk about John Oliver before.
Mm.
What's your opinion of John Oliver?
My opinion. So would you say that, like, John Oliver and Ben are on the they're exact same, except on different sides of the spectrum?
I wouldn't say they're the exact same, because even though people get their news from John, I mean, it's a comedy show.
Whereas, yeah, exactly. He's like complete entertainment. Whereas Ben, like, and his company, the Daily Wire, do extensive research, and they
you don't think John does extensive research for the bits that they have?
I think he does, but he's not. So the Daily Wire and Ben reference things, and it's almost like they have citations. It's a lot more scholarly.
Mm-hmm. But what do you think would happen? Did you ever watch The Daily Show?
Yeah.
With Jon Stewart, right? What would you say was the percentage of time that he spent making fun of Democrats compared to Republicans?
I don't know. Probably pretty even.
Oh God! Oh my gosh! No! Oh my God! No! Absolutely not! No! I mean, it was every once in a while, every great once in a while, he would make fun of a Democrat issue, but even within that story, he would always circle back around to, but Republicans are worse because, and this is ultimately what Ben has to do too. What anyone who has that kind of platform, they can't, he can once in a while, he can hit Trump or something like that, but ultimately they would lose their audience. It doesn't matter if it's the Daily Show or Ben Shapiro.
No, I disagree. Like, I don't think you've ever listened to any of his podcasts, because if you listen to his podcast, he's constantly, like, he goes by facts. And not only does he go by facts, it's not this sort of Jon Stewart thing where he's like, these guys are idiots. We all know that, it's like these guys are doing idiotic things, and this, because this, and don't you see, if they do this, then this is what it causes. And the statistics show this, and this. Do you see the difference?
No, because that was the same thing that Jon Stewart would do. I mean, Jon Stewart,
I watched Jon Stewart. He never did that, dude. He would just sit there and make faces about people.
He does. But there's so many things behind the scenes. I mean, he you can look up the things he did in terms of the bill with health benefits for 9/11 responders, where the Republicans in Congress tried for the longest time to deny the cancer links between 9/11 responders and and inhaling all these different things from the chemicals at ground zero. It's not going to be the same thing because they're in a 30-minute format. They don't really have any sort of published writing or anything like that. So, but they're not lies either, because I mean, even though they don't have time to go through and say, well, we got this from this source and we got this from this source. They're not, they're not lying about any of this.
No, I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying they were pure sensational, pure.
True, but okay, let's take an example of. There was one story. This is again just one of my favorite examples. Several months ago, there was a story on Obama where the headline was, and I don't even remember where he got this from, because of course, no news organization was really reporting this, but Ben kept sharing over and over. The headline was, let's see, let me find it. Here it was guy who said he had sex with Obama is pissed. Stormy Daniels is mainstream media darling. So, Ben uses this photo. It's Obama sneering. It's the kind of the common tactic. And he shares that 4 or 5 times within a single day. With the commentary was always yikes and gross. And so he's not you get away too by saying that. You don't say, well, this is true or I believe this, but there's this certain sort of implication that well, this might be true. So there's tons and tons of actual news and scandals involving Trump on a daily basis. And I think at that time there was something particular. Of course, I'm sure there was. Who could remember from 3 days ago what was going on with Trump, let alone 4 months ago? But so instead, people are being treated to what's effectively like the weekly world news. So there is just a huge entertainment factor there. It's the fact that it's masquerading as news when in fact it's entertainment. To me, it's not that different from, the content is different from what Alex Jones puts out, but they're ultimately both largely performance artists.
Oh, okay. Absolutely not. First of all, the biggest difference between Ben, see, like, even you're splitting him out and saying, like, I hate him because of Facebook. Everything else he does is pretty good, but this Facebook thing he posts, like, that ruins him for me, but the thing that he does, he's part of, that I think is great in this time of like severe partisan tribalism. You have the dark, what is it? The intellectual dark web founded. Do you remember Brett Weinstein?
I don't know.
You will when I tell you. The guy who was at that real liberal college. He's a real big liberal, but
that one real liberal college.
No, but remember when he was like Greenpeace College or something. But remember, he said that it was racism to not allow any whites on campus.
I don't really remember that. No.
Well, he just stood up and said, like, no, this is not good. We shouldn't have a day where we don't allow people to come on campus just because of the color of their skin. And he was eventually expelled from the school, and just lambasted and harassed, and the protests against him were just stymied any kind of conversation that they could have. But so he started this intellectual dark web, and you have people like Dave Rubin, who's
Mhm.
he's a Democrat coming over from Sanks. You know,
Mhm.
he's a
Right.
defector.
Yeah.
Sam Harris. Um,
Yeah. I
and,
like Sam Harris.
huh?
I like Sam Harris. Yeah.
All kinds. Actually, the only Republican is Ben Shapiro.
Mhm.
Uh, what's his name? Peterson, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan. Just tons of these intellectuals that are getting together to talk things out and to find common ground. And Ben is one of the I guess he's like one of the most popular guys in this group, but maybe not. Maybe Jordan Peterson is a little bit more. But here are people that are getting together to talk intellectually about these things. So
Sure.
maybe there is some shallow crap posting. Um, but that does not bother me. Like, I read that article and I'm like, why are we getting outraged about people?
Which article?
The outrage, profiting from outrage.
Oh, yeah, yeah, right.
I don't know, like, why should I get outraged about people profiting from outrage when this is, like, to me, when I'm reading this, I'm like, this is what's been going on in the news industry for since it begun.
Not since it began. I mean, we have a fundamental difference of opinion over that, where you, I think, said last time we tried to record this that you don't think that hard news ever really existed.
Well, look, I'm not saying that. I'm saying hard news never existed without the sensationalism. In other words, nobody is picking up a newspaper to get box scores. You know, like sure, hardcore sports people are, but
Oh,
like no, like just boring news it would have never been popular. It has to be, it has to be coupled with sensational editorial fluff.
if you go back, I can go back and find you. It has completely, again, as someone who came from it, part of the reason, and I was in sports specifically, and part of the reason I got out of it was because it dramatically changed. If you go back, we can go back and watch what Sports Center used to be. If you go back and watch what Sports Center used to be, or I can't even remember the NFL program that Chris Berman used to run. That it was just highlights. It was just all highlights, and things did change. I saw that progression while I was in it, to where I would screen cap it. I would screen cap photos of like ESPN's top headlines or Yahoo Sports' top headlines, where at times they would be nothing but like off the field controversial stuff. This absolutely 110% changed. It used to be different.
Don't you agree, though, that changed for sports because you're talking about something that you have very objective information? But as far as news goes, without editorializing, without sensationalizing a good portion of the headlines, people are not picking up the newspaper, right?
You don't have to, but you don't really have to sensationalize it, or you didn't at one time, because there's enough gory stuff out there that you just ran it as what it was, and people will latch onto that. One thing that we always used to get hit with a lot at the newspaper was people complaining, oh, you don't ever run anything but negative stories. It's just blood and gore and crime and blah blah blah, and we want positive stories. Okay, people don't read positive stories. It doesn't matter. I mean, I've done everything from weekly community newspaper to one of the largest dailies in Georgia, and it's the same at every one. The people at the little community, the people at the little community newspapers get it for the arrest report and the obituary. A lot of people will tell you that those are the two things that they get it for. And at the bigger level, it's just a more not well, now it is sensationalized now, but in a lot of cases it doesn't really have to be. It's just gorier on a more interesting level, in some ways, because you get like weirder stories. But you don't really, or you didn't in the past really have to sensationalize it, because just what the news provided, people were going to latch onto that for kind of the gory details of it. So people want to pretend that it's the, you know, the media doing all these things, and it has turned into that, because it's like a TV show where there's
you just said nobody reads positive stories, right?
yeah.
Like that. The newspapers have been preying on negativity since they have begun.
I mean, I can't tell you what it was like in 1900. I would have to go back and look at some headlines from the year 1900. So yeah, but it's still, there was a difference between, there was a level of newsworthiness to it that has gotten erased, because for multiple reasons, but people just don't care about it anymore.
Well, obviously, it's gotten a lot worse because of the 24-hour news cycle.
Right. But again, but what I was going to say was it's like a television show where, did you ever watch 24?
Yeah.
Okay. With 24, it was like 24 had to find a way to up the ante, because people were, we're getting bored with the same thing over and over. And so that show kind of jumped the shark when they set off the nuke, and when they set off the nuke in Los Angeles. I don't know if you were still watching at that point.
Spoiler alert.
What's that?
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, I'm sorry if anyone's upset over that, like whatever it was, like season 8 24 spoiler, then you know, my apologies. but basically, yeah, that model has been harnessed now. But I'll tell you what's happened is, in my experience, news agencies have had to adapt that to keep up, because people went to the Bill O'Reillys of the world first, and then news started adapting.
Bill O'Reillys and Jon Stewart's, and
sure, yeah, just like I said at the beginning, you know, Cenk Uygur, all these guys, but you know, really where I, you know, think of it starting was you know, Fox News kind of created that model. They figured out, they were smart about it. They figured out, like, you know, we can give this to people, and people want this. So there's a lot of things that it's not a case of having worked in it. I can tell you, it's not a case of like the news deciding, oh, we're gonna go do this to get more people. It was them losing readers and viewers to what people wanted to hear, and them effectively having to change their model in order to compete in a capitalist society. CNN is a perfect example. CNN, when we're off of Ben Shapiro at this point, but CNN for the longest time was like the plane crash network, you know. So I mean, they did run off of sensational stuff, but in terms of being partisan, they weren't really partisan.
Right. Okay.
Let me just finish that real quick. So Fox News was on the right, and MSNBC was on the left. CNN, you know, was just going in the tank in ratings. And so they hired, I think, Jeff Zucker, who used to run NBC. And he basically said, hey, let's just go to the left of NBC. And that's the way we're going to get an audience. And it worked.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree that it's gotten worse. Look, I have been decrying news organizations, you know, just prophesying the death of traditional news for years. But what I respect about Ben is, so sure, I don't respect his, you know, social media outreach. But what I do respect is when people get hooked and people get in and involved, they get involved in a deeper level than just Facebook. They get to see discussions with people from all over the spectrum and actually pick things apart in more than just sound bites, but like hour-long, you know, long form discussion.
But do they though? Like, I mean, I don't know, and I'm sure I would doubt that you know the demographics of how many people just use or just follow Ben's social media feed, and how many actually, you know, tune into his you know, hour-long discussions or whatever.
Well, the thing is, well, he posts the hour-long discussions, but it's more than just. But see, that's the thing, is it's more than just hooking people in and getting them hooked on. It's just a whole new approach to figuring out how to make the world better through information, that he's a part of. Now, he's also using the sensationalism. Yes, he is. But it's because it works. And that's my whole point about, the newspaper industry, or, we almost need another term for it now. And I agree, it has changed. It's impossible not to change when you go from your only source of news being this newspaper to, everything we have now. But I mean, you can look at the view counts on the videos. You can look at the view counts on his podcast. But I think the greater point here is that what he's doing is a lot more than just posting on Facebook. He is, I think, like for people like me, for example, he is providing both sides a lot of the time. I've never heard anybody so yeah, sure, to compare him to Jon Stewart. I'm getting into football now. Compare him to Jon Stewart. Yeah, I can see the similarities as far as the comedy, the generational thing, but you compare him to someone like Hannity, and nobody talks as bad about Trump.
Hannity's a comparable comparison.
Not even close. They don't.
It really is.
You really have to listen to his podcast.
I've listened to some of it. Like I said, he's more reasonable on those. But I do wonder, and again, neither of us have any idea what the number of this would be. How many people out of his general Facebook audience, how many people listen to those? Because in terms of articles, what you'll always find on social media is people commenting who never read the article. I think that's most people who comment just based off of the headline.
Yeah, but so I mean, there's a cynical part of me that's like, so he's using dumb people to fund his greater endeavor. Doesn't hurt me.
It doesn't hurt me either, but I have to deal with people. I have so many conversations with people who just have no idea what's going on in the world. And that's not all from Ben Shapiro. It's from a variety of different things, but, just elderly relatives that are convinced that, that someone's about to declare Sharia law in their neighborhood. So, when you have this, again, this sort of outrage stoking and fear mongering, the farther you go with it, just basically the angrier it makes me. And Ben does, in a sense, give both arguments, but what Ben is good at is setting up an argument that he can just obliterate. Part of the reason he got famous was off obliterating just clueless college kids. They're like, so I think people should have health care. Why do you think that's wrong? And then Ben's like, well, bam, So, I think I gave you the example before of, again, there's so many times where he either has to straw man, just blatantly straw man, or find somewhere in the corner of the internet the most outrageous liberal argument, and then assign that as the position of the entire left. And so when the Marvel movie Black Panther came out, he took an article overstating its importance in some way. I never read the article, but again, it's kind of irrelevant.
Okay.
And so, but no, because it's irrelevant in terms of what he did with it. So he assigns that as the position that basically everyone in the left is arguing. So he mockingly says that the left is arguing that it's more important, that Black Panther is more important than the civil rights movement, more important than the abolishment of slavery, etc. One article, and he presents that as the position of the left. So he also, within that segment, tried to argue that it shouldn't be a big deal because kids have already had, or black, basically black children have already had some superheroes like Wesley Snipes as Blade and Halle Berry as Catwoman. And like, I mean, if you're taking your 6-year-old to see this movie, you're a terrible parent. So I don't know that we should be arguing that, oh, you should have been taking them to this movie. So,
and I remember when he talked about it on the podcast thinking this is dumb.
Right.
But I mean, he's a human guy, and he's subject to his white privilege mentality just as much as any of us. And and on top of that, the thing is, he is super intelligent, and sure. I would say bordering on Asperger's. And
yeah.
there is some social like awkwardness that comes out in some of this stuff.
I've never really seen that. I mean, to me, he is always, like I said, one of the ways I could compliment him is to say that within interviews, he's just very engaging and personable. So I really haven't seen that.
Asperger's isn't the right term because, but there's that like nerdiness about him.
Oh, sure. But I mean, what does that have to do with anything, I mean,
because he gets caught up in these nerdy ideas, whether they be fueled by his white privilege perspective or whatever. He gets on these things. I don't think he's doing it because he's like, yes, I'm going to make money. Ooh, I'm going to decry Black Panther and that'll make me lots more money. No, I think he's just,
it absolutely will. Huh? I don't think he believes it all. Part of the issue with this that we got into before was you can tell that it depends on the level of deceit here, how far he goes with it. And with that, he kept talking about it being identity politics. Well, number one, I think by definition, identity politics should involve some form of actual politics. And I don't know that, your 6-year-old in Black Panther is going to qualify for that. So, like I said before, I mean, again, coming from a psychology background, the whole thing with kids, whether it's a girl seeing a female superhero or, a black child seeing a black superhero like Black Panther, is that there is an issue of identity there, and you and I have a mutual friend that we graduated with who's adopted, 4 African children. And in his life, he can kind of see the power of that he kind of saw an example of the power of that with his daughter, who was playing, I don't know, I think it was hockey or field hockey or something. But anyway, she saw Black Panther and she was inspired to name her stick Okoye, after the character that Denai Guerrilla, I can't remember her last name. She plays on The Walking Dead. Anyway, the character that she played, and he was even remarking on Facebook that how she was like really inspired and was had a couple of just great games where she was scoring more goals. So there's like, we're just kind of hardwired for that. Like there's this thing where we do kind of need to see someone who's like us in order to be a role model. And that's why, it's similar to the issue with, a lack of fathers in the home. And then you see like the crime statistics for young men. I mean, you just need role models. That's perfectly normal and perfectly healthy. And so his kid wasn't like making a political statement when she was, naming her hockey stick after the character.
Yeah, but see,
Ben understands
setting up a straw man too, because Ben wasn't talking about the kids involving themselves in the political debate. He's talking to politically minded people, talking about politically oriented showrunners.
But he's making it out as if the entire left is taking this position that Black Panther needs to be placed on this pedestal as the greatest achievement in the history of the African American community. We could go back and watch the video, and you'll see that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
So, right. So, but again, he pulled one obscure opinion piece article on that, and then designated that as the position of the left. And then on top of that, again, tried to transform it from an issue of identity politics, or from identity to identity politics. He goes into this story about his own daughter and how there's never been a Jewish president. So he absolutely does all those things. I mean, if if you're just going to say like he doesn't, I don't know how to argue with that. But
he doesn't what? He does what things?
A variety of stuff that you just said in terms of like how it really was, how he's right. It really was a case of identity politics and this, that, and the other. So again, I don't know, other than, again, kind of going through point by point what I was talking about. I don't know how else to argue with that.
Wait, but so you believe that he's saying that, like, he's saying nobody should be inspired by Black Panther?
No, I'm saying he completely twisted. He took something that was, again, basically almost a straw man. Again, he found an example of it, one obscure opinion piece, and then assigned that as the default position of the left. And that's his favorite, one of his favorite terms is, this is what the left is doing. This is what the left is doing. And so again, he just needs content. Like he just needs content. He's got a site that has to be all updated multiple times per hour. He's on multiple different platforms in terms of radio and written word. Now he's got, of course, his YouTube channel and various video interviews with people. He's just got to have content, and he's got to have content of what his viewers agree with. He can't write an article that says, man, gosh, Black Panther is great for the Black community.
No, I think that I think that I've told you this before. Not in this video, but I think that you are trying to read his mind, and like you're ascribing all these negative, like malicious, money grubbing, like thoughts that I mean I don't see.
It's like a tire store, and saying like the tire store wants to make money by selling tires, and being like, no, I think they're really concerned about the status of people's wheels on their cars. Like, this is just what this is.
No, and I understand that. I understand what you're saying there, but it's not like a tire store in that we're talking about principles and we're talking about things that are abstract and ideas.
Sure.
And is he peddling that? Yes. But is he doing so maliciously to line his pockets? No.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, we can go, I can give you, I haven't been on his site in a few days, even though I do like to browse it occasionally and find some sort of entertainment. But like lately, at least up until, the past week or so, I know his big thing had been the Democratic Socialist, Ocasio-Cortez, whatever her name is.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
There you go. Just one article after another, after another, after another on her. Why is she?
Here's the thing, dude, is like, I would be due, you wouldn't even have to pay me. Well, I guess you would have to pay me because I'm not doing it. But like the idea of getting paid to do that, like, I think just because he doesn't think like you, doesn't have the same, you disagree with him, doesn't mean he's doing this just to make money. Like, I think there is an aspect of it, capitalistic aspect of it, where he is doing to make money. But I think these are things he really believes. I think there's an amount of earnestness that you're a little biased against.
I'm not saying that he doesn't believe a lot of, I would say he probably believes his core principles. Sure. But how much time does he actually spend within his Facebook feed, on stuff that's really, truly core principles? I mean, it's stuff that gets packaged as that way. But again, like the Black Panther review, the whole thing with Obama, and the guy that he supposedly, slept with, the Ocasio-Cortez, who, I mean, again, it's stuff it's hot button stuff that's going to get clicks, I mean,
But wait a minute. This is not just hot button stuff that's going to get clicks. These are hot issues that people care about. He cares about. I care about. People on the left care about that we want to talk about. Like you said, if he would just post happy, flowery butterfly articles, nobody would pay attention to him.
Right. Right. No, I agree. So we agree on that. I mean, so he has to manufacture.
No, he doesn't have to manufacture anything in the same way that the newspapers didn't have to manufacture. Your exact argument saying like, look, we're just printing what's out there. And if we printed all the butterfly stories, we wouldn't have a newspaper. So I think we agree to a certain extent that he is, yes, there is an aspect, a darker aspect to news, or, news in the broader sense. I'm not talking about like, this breaking news. I'm talking about news in the sense of discussion surrounding current events.
Sure. But I mean, again, is Obama potentially, is a guy who's upset about Stormy Daniels getting press because he says he slept with Obama? Is that news? Where else did I see that from? Absolutely nowhere else. But it was something.
But in the arena of ideas, because I heard Ben talk about this. The whole thing wasn't like, let's talk about this guy who was porking Obama. Well, the idea was that the double standard that liberals have, where they will, I mean, kind of what you're talking about, they'll sensationalize whatever on their side, meets their ends. Like they hate Trump, therefore they'll sensationalize Stormy Daniels. But when it comes to news items that came up about, their savior Obama, they wouldn't even come close to touching that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can probably make better comparisons with Hillary, with some of the stuff that happened during the election. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the stuff with Obama, I don't know what we ever had that really compared that much to Trump. I mean, that's kind of Trump's argument is no president's ever been treated the way I have. Well, no president's ever acted the way you have. So, with on the other side of things, like when I think about the things that people were mad about with Obama, it was like he golfs too much. Okay, well, and now let's compare with Trump. Or he did the latte salute. Let's compare, to what Trump said about how, he likes guys who weren't captured during war, making fun of POWs. So he wore mom jeans one time. So you're right that the left wasn't going to, often hit Obama on stuff. But at the same time, like, it's just like an apples to rocket launchers comparison of what they had then versus what we have now.
No, because what I'm talking about here now, of course, Trump has set a different standard, but the point was that if there was, any hint, so like a senator calling up Russia, this is caught on tape, Russia, because these Russian radio personalities said they had footage of naked Trump, with prostitutes, jumping all over that, like salivating over that, versus untrue things, or maybe, probably untrue things coming out about Trump. I mean, Obama. Like we but we know that both are untrue. That, the hypocrisy is that they just want to murder Trump.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of that, like if he's saying, sure, there's a hypocrisy on certain things. But again, I mean, that's when he's sharing the story of the guy who supposedly had sex with Obama. I mean, it's just clickbait stuff, but I mean, there's, it's kind of hard to kind of get past that because we just have fundamental differences of opinion about what he's doing. So, I mean, like anything that we actually brought up, any specific item that we brought up, there's going to be, just like I mean, Ben can find a defense for anything, or on the left, someone on the left could find a defense for anything. So I think you just have to kind of take the line of work that the person is in on face value of what they're doing, and kind of compare to what their peers in the industry are doing. I mean, yeah, he's got these other things, but it's kind of like a guy who sells drugs on the side but has some decent stuff going. They're still kind of being a drug dealer. So again, what the drug they're peddling is outrage and righteousness and fear. The Babylon Bee did which is the kind of the Christian version of The Onion, did a parody where it wasn't about Ben, it was about Ben's content, and it said, it was something like man who needed to click on Ben's site to see what he needed to be outraged about that day. So I mean, that's kind of what the crux of the argument comes down to, is like, yeah, I think he probably genuinely believes most of the positions that he has, but it's in the way that it gets marketed to people. I've always had like a fundamental disagreement with people over this, where I would say, this just isn't healthy for people. It's like talk show. It's like trashy talk show mentality, just carried across like a broader spectrum of your life. It's like people watching the Jerry Springer show to be like, oh my gosh, those people are awful. I am so much better than them. So when the people who are your heroes, or at least the people who are the voices that you put in your ear, are telling you you need to spend all your time outraged or angry or worrying about what this group is doing, as opposed to saying, you need to be working on trying to improve yourself. We're in a lot of trouble, I think, at this point. Again, like, people have disagreements with me on that, but that's one of those things where it's almost kind of like, the financial crisis of 2009, where, a lot of people made a lot of money off of flipping houses for a long time. And then eventually that bill came due. And I feel like for all the outrage peddlers that we have out there, that bill is slowly coming due, and eventually is going to really come due at some point.
Like, what do you mean? Like, how do you picture it coming due?
I mean, I think just in what we're seeing right now. I mean, again, in just trying to have conversations with people, no one has to agree on basic facts anymore. Again, there's someone that you can go to say, well, this guy is saying this. And I think it's an overall quality of life sort of thing in a lot of ways. I mean, there are people I just don't call as much anymore, or go visit, because as much as I talk about politics, on here or on the internet or whatever, I don't want to talk about it with people in person, because I'm not. It's just people, again, typically older relatives or acquaintances or whatever, and I know I'm not going to make any headway there, and when but they can't not bring it up. It's like belief is a strange thing, and whether you're talking about religious beliefs or whether you're talking about the quality of a Star Wars movie, like, people are really passionate about that. And people, if people are anti-Star Wars or really pro-Star Wars, they will not let you be the opposite of what they are. Like, they are going to, they're like ready to corner you and convince you that this is how it has to be. And there's just no reasoning with that. And so it's kind of like, in having conversations with people about Trump or whatever, it's like, they're just like, don't you think he's a great guy? Don't you think he's doing a great job? And I just can't not be like, I don't know. I mean, actually I have just not said anything, and I've just tried to just let it blow over. And then they're like, you don't think so? So,
I have to see. It's funny because I have the totally opposite
where you are, yeah.
experience. Because I have to suffer through statements about how terrible he's doing and how much of it, how much of Satan and how people want to kill him on a regular basis, and just say, yeah, he's an ass. I mean, that's a no matter what, I can always agree with people to a certain extent, because there's no denying it. The man's an ass.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of like, with the Trump thing and with Ben, it's kind of the same principle, even though they're, two very different individuals. I mean, with Trump, I always ask people, like, you can point to a longer, more public track record. Ben doesn't necessarily have like a long public track record that you can go to find. But with Trump, I always just ask people, like, why do you think that a man who has never been devoted to anything other than making himself richer and more famous, who's treated everything in his life, from wives to businesses to employees, like they're disposable, who's clearly a narcissist, why do you think he wants to make America great again? And people will just be like, well, I just do.
Well, that's a separate reverse redaction.
That's a separate reverse redaction, sure. But again, like, in terms of what Ben does, when you compare his social media feed to the Tommy Laurens of the world and everything else, to me, it's just kind of obvious of what he's doing. I'm not saying that means he's an evil person, but I think what he does is of no use, almost no use to anyone. He's better than some in some ways, in terms of what you're talking about, with him being, more reasonable, in some ways. But I just think it's very destructive.
Well, would you agree though that that it is important that that these things be dealt with on a discussion level with people from all scopes of political affiliation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you, and again, like, if you took away his social media feed, what he does with social media, I wouldn't particularly, I'm just like running through my mind to think of anything else that I've seen him do. I mean, again, I think he gets, I think he's been smart about the way he's built his brand. And I think he's not, even though he's an intellectual, part of the way that he's built this status as this genius is just like smacking down dumb college kids,
Well, I mean, like, time out with that. That's sort of, to me, that's sort of, you're oversimplifying things. He's not just like, we're talking about colleges, with pretty, it's not like he's just rounding up dumb people and smacking them down. He's talking to some people that represent pretty clearly the smartest of them at that college.
I mean, as far as I know, it's just the people who attend, who've attended, which I don't know if he's actually still giving speeches as much grief as he gets over it. But from what I've seen, it's just, random questions from the audience. And so, again, I don't know that a 21-year-old is necessarily in the best position to refute him on anything. I mean, they all look, all of the ones that I've seen none of them have seemed like anyone who could really hold their own in a debate with a world famous intellectual, whether it's Ben or someone else.
But they think they can, and I think what has
Sure.
made him popular isn't that he's done it in a way like, oh wow, Ben's super intelligent. Well, I mean, yes, but in a way that he's able to articulate and give these youngins a spanking that they deserve.
Yeah, I mean, what was sorry, I missed what your point was overall there. Just the fact that he's
like it's not that he's just rounding up people and like, I'm smarter than you are. He's correcting dumb thinking.
No, I think he's. I mean, you can go look and go Google Ben Shapiro destroys on YouTube, and
or Ben Shapiro owns the left.
Or Ben Shapiro owns. Yeah. So again, there's a huge market for that. That is what people want. I think in some ways I just give him more credit than you are. I mean, again, it's a cynical, skeptical, distrusting sort of credit that I'm giving him. But I just think that he's smart enough to understand, what his business model needs to be and how he's going to get more followers. And that's exactly what people want. Is people just that's why Trump got elected. They just want to see someone from their side of the political spectrum just smack down anyone who's on the opposing side.
Yeah, but the thing is he doesn't do it. He does it in a way that's constructive. He's not doing it in a way that's wouldn't you agree that there's certain
I would say that he's not
just laughing at them and mocking them,
I think I could pretty easily go find. He's not not necessarily at a. I haven't watched enough of his stuff at open forums to see if he's. I don't remember him openly laughing or mocking them. He does openly laugh and mock stuff all the time. Again, on his social media feed. Yeah. So, but I mean, yeah. Again, when you get him in person, he's fairly engaging and if not polite, then at least somewhat cordial. So again, that's not arguing anything that I've
also
tried to say.
But what I'm saying, not just the polite, I'm saying he's constructive. He's injecting a certain amount of, as opposed to Trump, for example, when he smacks the opponents down, he's not doing it. He's doing it in a way that's constructive. That's actually enlightening the situation.
Well, if you agree with his point of view, that's the way you would see it. But again,
but even if you disagree with his point of view, he's doing it in a way that you can engage with the information.
I mean, again, that's not really how I see it, because I've seen, again, it would have to be a case by case thing where you take a specific headline or whatever. Okay, again, going back to, the thing with Black Panther, again, like, it's not him correcting to me. It's him just needing content and needing to create an argument on something. If we're talking about something different, if we're talking about, abortion or something, then sure, that's more of a general topic. And, that's something that I don't really disagree with him on. So it's something you have to kind of take on a case by case basis. But I guess I've just seen so many times where he's smart enough to know how to talk around loopholes or holes in his argument, or straw man an argument, or take something that's just been sort of like an outlier, like the Black Panther thing. I've just seen that too many times to give him too good of grades on his overall arguing and presentation.
I agree with you that it's not good to raise up these people as You know, and it's hard, you know, and it's hard for me being I'm a Rush Limbaugh baby, you know. I've been listening to Rush Limbaugh since I was young, and I do see the evils in it. So I do concede that there is an aspect where we have to be careful. But I wonder if there is at least a part of you that can concede that maybe he's not doing it out of evil, but just doing it, you know, out of evil greed, but doing it because out of earnest desire to change people's minds.
I think it may have started that way, and I'm sure it's not an all or nothing sort of thing. You know, I think most people, I think a lot of times people start with good intentions. You know, Jordan Peterson, you know, going back to the Jordan Peterson comparison, you know, when I watch his, especially his old videos, again, like coming from a psychology background, I'm like, man, this guy is really good. He really knows his stuff. There's a lot of truth in that. The more I see him, the more his celebrity status rises, the more skeptical I kind of become of him, because you know, just kind of like how even though Ford likes him, you know, I mean, Ford will acknowledge that his social media feed is becoming pretty caustic and combative.
Well, I mean, that's a common theme there. What if the problem isn't these people? What if the problem is social media?
But they're not just being combative with other people. I mean, again, maybe not as much with Jordan, but I mean, Ben has a business model that he's got to, he has to put content out there, you know, so he's not just like popping in on other people's, on news stories or statuses, you know. I mean, he's got to generate stuff that his audience agrees with. So yeah, I mean, social media and people are part of the problem. Again, most of the time the problem goes back to people, just like what I was saying with how, you know, even though people say print the positive stuff, they don't want the positive stuff. They want the gory stuff. Yeah. But at the same time, you know, when you print a gory story about, you know, a double murder or whatever, that's still news, and you're not trying to outrage anyone necessarily. I mean, some of those stories are outrage inspiring, but they're not always trying to outrage people. With again, with Ben's content, you literally can't go through and find anything that's not going to be designed to elicit one of those emotions from people, because that's just what they have to do in order to have viewers.
But you're talking about the title, because you admit you don't even read the articles.
No, I do read them sometimes. I'm saying people who comment don't read them. I don't watch his material. I'll read some of his articles, but I don't watch I rarely watch his actual videos and stuff. If I see his live once in a while, I'll listen to it.
So what is the answer? What is the remedy for this problem?
I mean, you know, I don't see, I've got a pessimistic view of it all, because these people aren't going to go away, and human nature is not going to change. People aren't going to stop gravitating towards them. So, you know, all I do is what I can do in my little corner of the world, in terms of telling people, like, please unfollow these people. Please stop making these people your heroes. And it's not just Ben Shapiro. There's, you know, there's a lot of people, probably a lot of sort of, you know, Christian figures that I've, you know, said for a long time, like, yeah, I don't think that guy's necessarily such a good guy. Mark Driscoll was one of those. And, you know, I know it probably comes across a lot of times as preachy to people, and like, oh, you think you're so much smarter than, you know, everybody else. I mean, I legitimately, genuinely do think I typically have better discernment than people when it comes to judge of character. because I mean, a lot of it is just having, you know, a long background in communications, to a certain extent in psychology, and then even within, you know, even within like film and storytelling too, because you see within so much of what happens in the world now, just how many media types have gone to sort of like a film model of just you know, exploiting conflict, just conflict. And you know, even Trump, there was I can't remember who said this, but someone said they had a private conversation with Trump where he said, you know, that the message and image that they put out needs to be like a TV show where Trump defeats his enemies every day. And I'm like, that's brilliant. You know, that's a brilliant model, because that's what people want. So I just feel like, you know, people like Ben, people like Trump, again, not apples to apples comparison, but they know how to exploit, you know, they're very intelligent when it comes to psychology, to communications and narrative storytelling. And they know how to exploit these, you know, hardwired impulses within people.
I agree. I do agree with that.
I accept your surrender.
So be it. Because I mean, there is. I do submit to this idea that you have a good, maybe a more moderate, more more clear vision when it comes to this stuff and these people. And I do submit to that, and I do commend you on your endeavor.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. And I think it would behoove you.
You started to start that sentence with "but," and then you changed it to "and."
No, I know you. But what are you talking about, dude?
It's like there's a line. There's a line in Game of Thrones where Jon Snow tells Sansa, "Father always used to say, everything that comes before but is horseshit."
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All of a sudden, all you care about is butts. Okay. But I just said but.
I know. I was pointing at you, but then I realized that on my screen it probably wasn't. It probably wasn't showing up on the main feed. So,
do you think that it would behoove you to? Don't you think it would help your endeavor to explore the interest of those of us who see a lot of good in these people?
I mean, I feel like I mean, you and I haven't had a lot of in-depth conversations about. Well, we now have about Ben, but
two big ones.
We've had two, but some of these other people. So I think Ben, we've pretty well got covered. We're just going to have to agree to disagree. You know, some of the others, I mean, I haven't, you know, explored them with you, but I mean, with other people, you know, I feel like I've explored them pretty extensively. And so, you know, with some of these guys, I'm just not sure. Again, like with Trump, I think people at this point, unless he did something really outrageous to maybe lose some of his base or something like that. I mean, I
don't think you're hearing it. I'm saying, like, would it behoove you to not just explore these other guys, but to, in an empathetic way, like, sort of submit and say, like, well, what is it about this that people like? And is there something good? Because none of it is completely bad.
Right.
What is the good that people are obtaining from this?
Yeah, I don't deny that. I'm not saying it's all 100% bad. I mean, again,
no, but even when you say that, it's like, I'm sure there's a tiny speck of good in there. You know, it's like,
well, I guess my problem with it is, with well, never mind. I'm not going to finish that sentence. There's a couple of things, I guess, that I just sort of I feel like I've explored it pretty well. And I don't, again, with Ben, if you take down his actual viewpoints, I agree with some of his viewpoints.
Some of them, dude. When I hear him talking, he sounds exactly like you.
Yeah, I mean, we would have to go through, if you want to talk specifics, because I don't listen to, again, I don't really listen to his stuff that often. So I don't know what all they are. But with Trump, again, I understand. I think I understand the appeal with Trump. But
but
yeah, there it is. There it is. It's a big, it's a giant butt with Trump. I understand that a lot of it, again, what I talked about at the very beginning was that even though Ben's motto is facts don't care about your feelings, implying that, he's just a strict, hard truth teller. What he's really peddling is feelings. What Donald Trump is really peddling is feelings when he talks about we'll be saying Merry Christmas again and stuff like that. It's this, it's a lot of fear. I think it's a lot of fear of sort of, the browning, what they call the browning of America. By 2050, roughly 2050, whites will be a minority. It will no longer be in America. Whites will no longer be the majority race.
I think that's a minority view.
I absolutely think that I've seen study, like in all the conversations that I've had with people, the number one issue by far is illegal immigration.
Well, have you seen studies or
yes.
have you had conversations?
Yes.
Those are two different things.
Yes, that is what I was about to get to. Is I'd have to go find this for you, but there was a study that came out that like put ranked like all the issues with voters, and it was an absurd level to which illegal immigration was by far above.
Right. Yes, but that's conflating two issues. That doesn't mean that people are worried that the America is getting browner. That just because I have problems with illegal immigration, but that doesn't mean it has anything to do with color.
No, well, it may not with you, but
it may not with a lot of people.
I think with most people it does. Like, because again, when I talk to somebody, like I'm not content just to talk on a surface level here, which is why I'm, or not, I don't mean here, but on a surface level with them, which is why I'm, we'll do things like this and sit down and, and have conversations like this with you. So I, have to like pick at it and be like, all right, well, what really is the problem here? Because would you agree that, I mean, for me, again, coming from the background that I have, like most of the time in conflicts, what people are saying they're mad about or what they say they're feeling is not actually what it is. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd agree that most people don't know what their real fear is.
Right. There's a deeper issue to it. And so I think with illegal immigration, it's not really about illegal immigration. Illegal immigration is exacerbating a problem that people have with, again, the quote unquote browning of America. But I have like picked at people until they will say like, yeah, I'm worried about the future of the white race. Again, this is typically older people who just don't care, and they'll just kind of tell you. But I think most people, okay, let's take, for example, the national anthem, the kneeling during the national anthem issue. I don't think I don't think people are worried about football players just not being patriotic enough. When I show people you know, the YouTube interview, you know, where Donald Trump did an interview with Howard Stern, where he was saying, you know, that casual sex was his quote personal Vietnam, and that it made him feel like a quote very great and brave soldier. And then people are just like, meh. You know, I'm like, oh, come on, you can't have it. But if you really care about people disrespecting soldiers, then what's worse, some football players who have nothing to do with anything militarily related doing that, or your commander in chief on two separate occasions doing something incredibly disrespectful to that, and they're just like, no, you know, it's the football players bother me. This doesn't. So
I think the point that you're missing is that what people don't like is the politicization of it. So when Trump said those things, he wasn't doing it, for political reasons. It's the political. So bringing politics into sports is the thing that I think ticks most people off.
I don't think that people, they don't want to hear that, but
do you like the fact that when we enjoy football, we have to like somehow reconcile this other political thing that's going on?
It honestly, I can honestly tell you, it does not bother me in the least. And people will say, you know, the other argument that I've had with people, or the other question I've asked is, well, what would you rather them do? You know, do you want marches in your streets? Well, no, we don't want that either. Well, then where do you want, if people are going to protest, and if you think that Americans can keep the right to protest, since we're all about the Constitution when it comes to, you know, freedom of speech and 2A, but you don't like protests because, again, it tends to be either liberal or minorities. I mean, to me, that's the perfect place. That's the perfect place to do it. I actually kind of like them doing it there. It doesn't block my street. It doesn't block the highway. And yet they still get their message across. They're not doing anything that harms anybody else.
I get that. But I think you could understand how people would be irritated by it, whether it was white, black, or brown, whatever person, like saying the message behind it was very clearly America sucks.
You think that, or you think people think that?
No, people said that. They said the reason I'm kneeling, Kaepernick said the reason I'm kneeling is because I will not stand for a flag that represents a country that sucks so bad.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, but at the same time, you know, in terms of, I don't think politicizing it really has, again, in terms of it being politicized, it's going to, there again, depend on where you fall. Like if you had had the reverse of players like kneeling because they don't like Trump, or I'm sorry, if they didn't like Obama being in office, if you would never have had that happen.
No, because but see, here's the thing: is that he wasn't saying he was kneeling in protest to Trump, or in protest to Kraft, or in protest to Kellogg's, whatever. He was kneeling because he hated our country, like in so many words.
The Kaepernick thing is pretty complicated. Number one, I don't like Colin Kaepernick. You know, he's had he wore his socks one day of like police officers as pigs. He wore his, I think, Che Guevara shirt. He had praise for Castro. I don't like Colin Kaepernick.
But see, all these other things is in the same vein.
I don't think they are. I think you would have to, I mean, they get lumped together, and that's the way people view them. But I mean, basically, but to Kaepernick's credit, he did have a couple of things. As much as I don't like him, as much as I think, you know, he's wrong and misguided about a lot of stuff.
He was a terrible football player too.
Yeah, he never learned to pass that well.
He was very good at the read option.
He was
very good. So is RG3. You don't see anybody saying RG3 should get more playing time.
True. You know, he had a good point. And, you know, every once in a while he would have a good point in terms of talking about how, you know, with the whole make America great again thing, you know, I think one of his best quotes was, you know, like America's never been great for people of color. And he is 110% right on that. You know, I mean, I just had to, when I went back and got
Hold on. Wait a minute. Like, that's a very complicated statement.
It is, but it's not wrong.
It is. It's been very great in comparison to other countries here. Like, it's the amount of freedom, you know, like there's been some terrible things, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't been great for them.
I mean, I just went back.
Even take away that hasn't, like, wouldn't you agree that America is great for all races?
America's great. It's better than a lot of countries. One thing, when I went back and got my second degree, I had to, because of our alma mater, Toccoa Falls College, I never actually took a state or U.S. history course. Or wait, no. I know I did have U.S. history. It was, I needed a second one to satisfy. I think I needed a second one to satisfy some sort of University System of Georgia requirement. And I needed a state history course, which I never had or was never required. I don't know if he even taught one of those at Toccoa. Anyway, so I had to go back, and rather than take the courses, I was able to take exemption exams. Okay, except these were not easy. Well, one of them was an easy exemption exam. The U.S. one was easy. Georgia was, oh my God, that was hard. It was insanely, like, they gave you a study guide for it, and it was worthless. It was absolutely worthless. You had to go. There was a book, the book that the test was based on, and you just had to read that book cover to cover and memorize that as much as you could. So I did. And when you go back through that again, like, you get a very good reminder of, like, all of this is very abstract to us, you know, the things that have happened in the past. Here we are, as we sit here on our Google Hangout, waxing philosophical about Ben Shapiro. Like, if you go back through the history of America, oh my gosh, it is a horror story. Like, if this was a movie, it would be a horror story. Just all of the terrible things that have been done. And it's not that there's anything especially evil about, white people. You know, if you go to other areas of the world, you know, you'll see a certain race oppressing its own people and this, that, and the other. But in Western civilization, the people in power have typically been, you know, white men. And the stuff that happened to Native Americans, the stuff that happened, I mean, not just with slavery, but I mean, everything, up through, the history of the United States has been just horrible. It has just been horrible. And so, again, it's when you see an athlete with millions of dollars, it is easy to be like, well, what are you complaining about? You've made a life that most people would dream about off of this country. And maybe, I don't know, maybe some of them are doing it for the wrong reasons or selfish reasons. But if they're actually doing it because, they still feel like, that it's kind of an unfair and biased, and if there's too much racism and bias in America, then it's hard for me to argue with that especially based off of what I've seen from Trump emboldening people to say how they really feel.
I get that. And I think it's a very complicated issue.
It is.
And it's hard to really find any kind. I don't know. You might not agree, but I feel like it's hard to find any kind of real truth, any real remedy
to just our problems in general, or specifically like the issue of race relations, or all of it.
Oh well, that's difficult. But no, I'm talking about. I guess I'm talking. I guess I'm going back to Ben Shapiro, and going back to sort of this very divisive mentality, and people on both sides getting their daily dose of outrage. But not, it's not. It's you say outrage. I'd see it more as like their daily dose of you know confirmation that they're okay, confirmation that they're on the right side, confirmation that the other side is bad. I think it clearly, to me, it comes down to sense of worth and belongingness,
But the stories are rarely ever about, again, going back to the whole positive, the positive stories versus, gore, or positive stories versus outrage. If you go through, Ben's feed or Matt Walsh's feed or whatever, Tommy Lauren's feed, you'll rarely, once in a while you will, but you'll rarely see stories of like, oh, look what this great conservative is doing.
Oh, you see that all the time on Ben Shapiro's. I don't know about Tommy Lauren and Matt Walsh. Those guys.
What percentage do you think it is? I mean, compared to look at what the left is doing.
I'd say at least 30%.
Okay. I don't know the number, but I'll go look through it and figure out a statistical total.
I'll help you if I can, because and I don't trust your numbers. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Well, we've talked a whole array of things, and we've gone way past our time at the time of
you and your 30 to 40 minutes. That was that. See, you're not just unrealistic about Ben. You're unrealistic about time management too.
You. Okay. Well, I think it's been helpful for me to hear your side and to really, I think you have, like I said before, an admirable endeavor. Like, I feel like this is something that you're working on to help people with, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, and like I said, it's your channel, and I know you're a fan of Ben, and so I appreciate you letting me come on and bash him repeatedly.
This channel doesn't belong to me, man. This channel belongs to the people.
There you go.
And Ben can defend himself.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think it is good to hear that perspective, and to hear the call to like, hey, let's shut this off. Let's and I think that's what we've been doing here on the reverse redaction, is not just trying to get to the bottom of things, but trying to get to personal, get to truth through personal interaction and hashing things out between people, instead of between, profiles.
Right. Yeah. And or in a Twitter feud, where you're, what is it now that it's up to now? Your character limit? I don't remember.
It's double.
Yeah, I think it's I don't remember, but there's not much you can do on Twitter. There's really not much you can do with strangers. Period. It's just going to be a.
You just got to own them, man. You just got to own them.
Just got to own the libs.
All right, man. Well, hopefully nobody's owning anybody tonight on this reverse redaction of Ben Shapiro. Next, we will talk about fantasy football if we get to it.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, I wanted to say I found your channel. I had already found it, but for some reason, I guess reverse redaction wasn't subscribed to your channel. So I've been watching some of the cool discussions you've had with Steven Sanders, who was brought up earlier about DC and Karate Kid. Some pretty interesting insight.
Right. Yeah, we had a couple of those. His life's been kind of crazy since his wife and kids got home. But yeah, we had a couple of those, and those were fun. The DC one we ended up just mostly talking about Marvel. But the Karate Kid one was we stayed on topic with that one. So
it was good. It was interesting.
That one was fun. We need to we'll have to get him.
Well, and what I was thinking is creating. I'm having a hard time, and my voice is getting worse and worse. But creating some sort of intellectual dark web of our own.
There you go. Ooh,
I was thinking something like intellectual
darker web.
No, I was going the other way, like the intellectual white web or something.
We definitely cannot go with that title. Absolutely not. That is, I'm gonna immediately strike that down.
I'm talking about like white magic versus dark magic. You know?
I know what you meant, but that would immediately not fly.
Oh man, well this has been good. Hopefully, so with that, I was thinking, I just send a link out to everybody who's interested, all these, you and Steven and Ford and Mike Emert and Joe Rhodes, I think would be a good voice in some of these discussions. He agrees way more with you, by the way.
Gotcha. Smart man. Yep.
He's smart. He is smart, but you guys are
right. And he's on Facebook. I see his stuff on Facebook. So yeah, he likes enough of my content on Facebook that I figured he was probably pretty close to me politically. But yeah. No, I like that idea. I think that's I would probably create my own just different, I don't know, something I'd have to think of some clever title like reverse redaction, other than just because I've just got too much of I've got that plus just old junk on my channel. So
well, maybe we could create something if we could think of a name like the intellectual dark web, the intellectual dark web junior high or something, JV team.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't know.
We'll have to think about it. Yeah. But I gotta go.
All right. Thanks again. And
thank you, man. It's been a good discussion.
Yeah.
And
I look forward to fantasy football. I said the other day on social media that I've decided that I am the fantasy football version of a predatory lender.
Okay. I want to hear more about that next time.
There you go.
All right. Have a great night, man.
Thanks, man. You too.
Hope you feel better.
Yeah, I'm getting close.